Tess, you started by writing romances. What made you change to the thriller genre, and the serial killer thrillers in particular?
Well, I first wrote a thriller called Harvest, and that was because of a conversation I'd had with a policeman who'd been traveling in Russia recently. He said that children were vanishing from the streets of Moscow and were being sent to the Middle East as organ donors. I was so horrified by that, I wanted to write a thriller with that premise and bring in my medical training. That was my first medical thriller, and I wrote 4 of those. But as for the serial killer genre, I admit that it was a reader that made me do it. I was on book tour for a book about the space program, and an ordinary-looking woman stood up in the audience and said, "I'm not interested in space. I want you to write a book about something I am interested in." And she said, "That's serial killers and twisted sex." So I got that assignment from one of my readers and started thinking about how I could write a serial killer book that would have medicine in it. And that's where The Surgeon came from. And ever since then, I've sort of been writing crime thrillers.
The existence of evil has been a continuing interest in your novels since The Surgeon. In Body Double, you investigate, through Maura Isles and the circumstances surrounding her birth, whether being a killer is something one can inherit genetically. Do you have your own views on that?
It gets back to an age-old question of nature versus nurture. Are killers born or are they made? I think there's a little bit of both going on. There are indications that there may be some genetic component. There is a family in Holland, an extended family, where it appears every single man in that family has served time in prison for a violent crime. We do know there is a genetic abnormality called the double Y syndrome. Boys who are born with 2 Y chromosomes almost invariably are much more aggressive. And then there are these sort of episodic things that happen. One of the most interesting cases I heard about was a family in Oregon, in the United States. The young man called the police one day and reported that his father had raped his girlfriend. And by the way, he said, there are girls disappearing in the neighborhood, and I think my father may be involved. Well, when the police investigated, they dug up the father's backyard and found the remains of these little girls. But the really strange twist in that was that the young man's grandfather at that moment was spending time in prison for killing young girls and burying them in his backyard. So we have a grandfather and a father who are both serial killers doing quite similar things. You have to wonder when you read this, is there a genetic component? And I think there probably may be to certain criminals.
In the Mephisto Club, you take the existence of evil to a whole new level. Could you tell us something about this?
Well, I've been interested in evil for a long time, and it's not just an academic thing. I have been exposed to a murder in my childhood. I had a very good family friend who I adored, a man I used to call my uncle. And he was later convicted of having murdered his sister-in-law in quite a brutal way. She was beaten to death and may have died from drowning in the toilet. So ever since then, I have wondered, what is it that makes a seemingly ordinary person do something quite awful? And I think that in my own questions about evil, I wondered if there was a universal concept, some explanation that could encompass why it is even in existence among us. And the Mephisto Club is an exploration of that.